But I want to do something a little bit different this morning as usual. Obviously, it's not the same when we're kind of in these paused Sundays or these pit stop Sundays. I sometimes call them, where in between series we'll sing a psalm, I'll preach from a psalm, and we'll have the Lord's Supper. They often do look a little bit different than my usual messages. It's not the common expositional preaching of a text. And while I have that freedom, I guess, to play around a little bit, I would like to do so with the presentation of this text. How do I say this? If you remember when I preached through Jonah, I brought up a portrait, one of my favorite portraits. It's canvas art from a Russian painter by the name of Ivan Aivazovsky. And if you remember that, you'll remember that illustration didn't work at all. But I brought up this portrait, and if you can imagine that portrait is the ship over the stormy seas, and or maybe imagine a more common portrait to you, like Van Gogh's Starry Night, or something very approachable. Picture it for a moment without any color. You'll still recognize that's Van Gogh's Starry Night just as much as I'll recognize this is Ship Over the Stormy Seas by Ivan Aivazovsky, right? You'll still certainly recognize the picture, but it won't evoke any of the feelings that it's supposed to evoke without the color, without the color and sometimes I think it can be to the error of the minister when he preaches a psalm and we distance ourselves as much as possible from the emotions of those in the Psalms for the sake of being able to discern a plain meaning from the text. And I don't want to do that, because the Psalms are poetry, and poetry is meant to be interpreted with the color in mind, right? It's an emotional thing. It's a poem. So I want to focus on the feelings of the writer as I read. So I'm going to read this psalm one more time. Psalm 126. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. You probably were able to pick up on some of the emotions a little bit better when I read it that second time. Right? Things like laughter, things like joy, things like gladness. Ryan listens to a lot of soundtracks to like movies and things, like soundtrack scores, like Hans Zimmer and who's the John Williams. Yeah. So all sorts of scores behind the movies, and just like if you're watching a movie without the music, you're not going to feel what you feel if you were to watch that movie with the music in it. And the Psalms, that's why I sing them as well. It's to our detriment that we don't, because the soundtrack for the Christian life is the book of Psalms. The Psalms are the soundtrack of the Christian life. And so with all that noted, I want to do something a little bit different this morning. If you've ever watched the show Blue's Clues, Steve will jump into the picture. He'll be like, "Blue Skidoo, weekend," and they're like, he jumps into the picture. And so I want us to jump into the picture with the psalmist this morning. Try to feel the emotions of this passage. Well, what are we feeling here? And how does it affect us when we jump back into our portrait of life? How does this affect us when we jump into our portrait of life? Well, look at these first 3 verses. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. The author and the occasion are not mentioned in this psalm, but restoring our fortunes is most likely in reference to the Babylonian captivity. And so they're experiencing a sort of liberation from captivity. And I try to think of what, even just that line, but you've got, then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. The Lord has done great things for us because so we are glad. When I think of laughter, I think of my namesake in the Bible. I think of Sarah laughing because she was so sure that she couldn't have a kid. And God blesses her and Abraham with a son anyway. And so she just laughs at like how unbelievable this is. It's sort of like it says, we were like those who dream. When I think of shouts of joy, I think of the in the book of Luke, the lame man who was healed by Jesus, and all of a sudden he's leaping for joy in the temple gate. Sheer joy and gladness. And so I think of times when I've also experienced, sheer joy or gladness. When Elijah's up here playing guitar with me, or when I watch Lydia play soccer, or things like that, where I'm just like I feel joy, I feel gladness, and these are just what I think of when I read, just things that call out to me the emotions of the psalmist, bring to light my own emotions that I've felt, whether relative to the text or not. We're not doing that yet. I'm just saying, what does this make us feel? Right? And the psalmist is experiencing, though, a culmination of all these things, because he's been brought out of his captivity, and he experiences within him the sheer joy of freedom. That's his emotion here. That's what he's experiencing, the sheer joy of freedom. And so we can relate a little bit, because we felt laughter, we felt joy, we felt gladness. Even the text, like those who dream. Like, even the text, those who dream, it makes me think of, I had a dream when I was in, it was elementary school. I had a dream that I had a PlayStation 3, and it was the greatest dream in the world. And then I woke up, and I didn't have one. And I was just a wreck. I was like, I wish I could go back in a dream, or maybe like when I think of when I look at the pictures of, Kaylee and I's engagement pictures, we just got those back, and I look at those and I'm like, I look at her and I'm like, I'm living the dream, Or I could think of something like when Hannah and I were in Lakeland and we were walking around one of the lakes, they're plentiful there. We were walking around and just all of a sudden this fish falls from the sky onto a car. And a bald eagle swoops down, picks up the fish, and then we're just like, did that actually just happen? Is this is this a dream? That's what it makes me think. Is this a dream? Surely not. And so he's experiencing the culmination of all these things. Like I must be living a dream. I'm actually freed from my captivity. And so he experiences within himself the joy of freedom. Second, if you look at verse 4, it says, "Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negev." MacArthur gives some clarity to what this means. He said, the arid region south of Beersheba, it's utterly dry in the summer, but its streams quickly fill and flood with rains of spring. And so in this manner, the psalmist says that Israel's fortunes will rapidly change, or have rapidly changed from nothing to everything. Right? So they're praying, "Restore our fortunes, O Lord," like with the streams in Negev. We've seen you do it before when you liberated us from Babylonian captivity. I've experienced that joy before. Do it again. I know you're capable because you have. It is a night and day difference from nothing to everything. I think when I read that, I think of when I was in the Amazon, and you can get to a point in the river where there's the Black River on this side and the Amazon on this side, and they're different colors and they're different temperatures, even if you have one hand in one stream and one in the other. Just a night and day difference. I think of when Kaylee is, when Kaylee is visiting, and just it's like the house is brighter and the coffee's better. It's like everything is different. And then like when she leaves, it's like, I dread like coming home and not seeing her car in the driveway, or saying something dumb and there not be like Isaac, like afterwards, like I miss that terribly. And it's just this night and day difference in my day and in the way that I feel. And so this psalmist here he's hoping to experience this emotion again. He's hoping to experience, he's in despair and bleakness, and he's hoping to experience once more that joy of freedom. But because he's experienced it, he experiences the promise of life all around him as well, because he knows that God is capable of doing this once more. So his emotions are of endless captivity, of toil, of hopelessness. And then like a flip of a switch, right? Like the streams of Negev, all around him are the promises of life. Now, at this point, because these are usually pretty short messages, right? At this point, I'll go ahead and I'll give you a shortcut, right? I'll just go ahead and tell you what I've been attempting to lead you towards. Think for a moment of what is happening here. There's liberation, and there's a night and day switch from despair to the promise of life. And you think to yourself, the reason you might be able to so easily jump into that portrait is because you're only jumping in place. It's the same portrait. It's the same emotional coloring. It's the same providential brush strokes. And most importantly, it's the same divine artist. So it's like, so no wonder this is I can relate to the emotions of someone in, first century agrarian Israel. Oh, because we're still in the same portrait with the same artist and the same brush strokes, and it's all colored with the same colors of emotion. psalmist experiences within him the joy of freedom. What do we experience upon the liberation of sin? Upon the liberation of the eventual hell? What do we experience upon the liberation of ourselves? What do you experience when you were saved, is what I'm asking. Hopefully within you, the joy of freedom. Okay, well, what did the psalmist experience next, right? Around him, the promise of life, the abrupt, awakening promise of life. Well, what do you experience upon your liberation, right? You are lost and then you are found, like streams in the Negeb. While you are lost and then you are found. You go from blind hedonism and moral relativism, and now all of a sudden you have sight with a moral law from a moral lawgiver. And most importantly, you were dead and now you're alive. Like streams in the Negeb, right? A night and day difference. And hopefully I'm not being too allegorical with this message, but I'm merely trying to show you that these emotions that have been felt by the psalmist here, with the joy of his freedom, with the promise of life, they're things that the believer should have experienced upon the liberation of ourselves, not from captivity, but from sin. And upon the promise of life that is abrupt and life-changing, that when we experienced a movement from death into life. Right? As believers, we could very much guess what ought to come next in this psalm, quite frankly. Think of the Ordo Salutis, or the order of salvation. Right? We are initially sanctified, so we are indwelt with the Holy Spirit. We are justified. Christ has made it so it is just as if we had never sinned. Right? We are justified. Like sort of in a legal language almost, right? We are justified. We are regenerated. That's going from death to life, right? We are born again, so to speak. We are adopted into the family of God. So what comes next? Well, progression. Progression in sanctification. Submitting obediently to the work of the Holy Spirit and putting on and wearing the clothes of righteousness and holiness and killing your sin before it kills you. So what might the psalmist experience next? Before him, the challenge of work. So within him was the joy of freedom, around him was the promise of life, and before him was the challenge of work. It is no different with us. It's no different with us upon experiencing our liberation from sin and our being born again. We have within us the joy of freedom. We have around us the promise of life, and we have before us the challenge of work. Verse 5 and 6 says, "Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy." And verse 6 says, "He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him." God's people must still sow seeds for the harvest in a world of tribulation and sorrow. Why? Because ultimately, the Lord will cause his people to return with songs of joy in the end. Saint Augustine said, "I say this so that we should not nurse hopes of receiving the fruits of our sowing during this time in which we have done the sowing. Here we sow with toil a harvest of good works. But it is in the time to come that we shall garner its fruits with joy, according to what is written." And it was St. Bede the Venerable who says, "This discourse of the Lord is also appropriate to all believers who are striving to arrive at eternal joys through the tears and distress of the present life, who rightly lament and weep and are sorrowful during the present time, since they are not yet capable of seeing him whom they love. As long as they are in their body, they recognize that they are on a journey from their fatherland and kingdom, right? Right. So as Lewis kind of put forth, as C.S. Lewis put forth, we're aliens here. This is not our home, right? Right. Don't take that and run with it, C.S. Lewis, right? But basically, this isn't our home. They have no doubt that they must reach their crown by labors and contests. Their sorrow will be changed to joy when, after the struggle of this present life is over, they receive the prize of everlasting life, about which it is said in the psalm, "Those who sow in tears will reap in joy."